Finger locking is something that still happens in modern grappling, and by that I don't mean submission holds that are applied to the fingers specifically. Almost no rule set that I know of, and in fact, I would go so far as to say no rule set that I know of allows for that. So, of course, Wally J, old Japanese jiu-jitsu, and he's from more disciplines than just that, but he was an innovator in submission holds that just apply to the fingers. And if you've never actually experienced those, they're brutal, right? It's like you know, not something to do in a sport context, but none of that is what I'm talking about here. What I am talking about is in modern grappling matches, still to this day, like jiu-jitsu tournaments, whatever, people will reach out their hands and they will voluntarily interlock one another's fingers. I don't do that. I don't know why other people do. I'm not going to say I've never done that. I've caught myself doing it in some grappling matches, but I try to never do that because there's almost no reason to ever interlock your fingers like that and expose them to a risk of getting broken. And it only took me having one experience like that where I interlocked fingers and the guy did something wacky with a body movement, and all of a sudden, like, my fingers had to go wherever his whole body was taking them. Not a great idea, right? You want to make a grip that's strong, but a grip that you can still bail out on, right? But what we have here in this video is a wrist lock, which is still completely realistic, even in modern sports settings. If people insist on doing that dumb finger interlocking grip when you first start out a match or at any other point in the match, it becomes trivially easy to turn someone's wrist. And, with a lot of these extended wrist locks, the idea is that the tension travels up the line of proprecipitation throughout the entire limb. So first it puts strain on the wrist, then it puts strain on the ulna, right? The long bones between the wrist and the elbow. Then it puts strain on the elbow. Finally, it puts strain on the shoulder. And it's wherever the rotation stops. I don't want to say it's wherever the rotation stops. I'm going to say that it can result in a break anywhere on that circuit at any stop in between, just depending on a lot of different variables, right? But the kind of rotational wrist lock that you can do when the guy voluntarily locks fingers with you is exactly the one we're seeing in this film strip, and it works. And when I have done this in the training room, the wrist is sometimes what my opponent or my training partner says he feels the tension in, but sometimes he's like, wow, it felt like my ulna was going to break, meaning that long bone in between the wrist and the elbow. Every once in a blue moon, I get a guy who says it put a little strain on the shoulder, but honestly, there's a lot of things that have to happen before the shoulder ends up being the source of strain. It's more likely that the wrist or the ulna or the elbow, way before any of that, is going to be the location of stress and strain. And if you try this and you cut your angles right, you will get a tap at some point in your grappling journey. Like, you can 100% hit it. And you will make people just that much more reluctant to lock fingers with you ever again. So are you going to be everyone's favorite person in the dojo when you hit that? No. And part of that is just that there's a stupid taboo against wrist locks, and I understand where it comes from. If I know that someone makes a living with manual labor, like all of a sudden if their hand hurts, they can't work, I try not to go for wrist locks, or at least if I do, I catch them and release them and just kind of let the guy know, hey, I had you in a wrist lock, but this is the training room and we're just trying to get a good training experience, right? But other than that, like, it's a martial art technique, and you should, if in grappling, it's legitimate and you should be inoculated against it. And on top of that, a lot of wrist locks, when you are competent in knowing when they're being slapped on early enough, they become fairly easy to defend, but not if you don't invest that time in letting people try wrist locks on you without giving them a stink eye, right? However, this interlocked finger situation makes it that much harder for the guy to escape a wrist lock, and they did it to themselves voluntarily, right? So again, full circle, that's one of many reasons why I don't voluntarily lock fingers with people in those grips anytime I can help it. It's just a bad idea from several angles. And one of them, actually, I would say the secondary reason why, is because this wrist lock becomes available. The first reason is because I don't want my fingers broken if the guy does something jerky. But does this wrist lock work? 100%. Yes, it does. So happy hunting. Have some fun.